Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. We are going to talk today about an epic, and don't change the dial, because this is not one of those epics like you had to read in school. This epic is called The End of the Jews, and it is by Adam Mansbach, published by Spiegel and Grow, and which is a division of Random House. Is it not, Adam?
Yeah, it's a brand new one.
A brand new. Is that good to be working for a brand new subset of Random House?
I think it is, in the sense that I'm sort of on the ground floor, and they need to do well if they're going to continue to exist. There's the aspect of being something of a guinea pig for them as well. But Cindy Spiegel and Julie Grau, the women who are at the helm of it, came from Riverhead Press, and they did very well.
Right.
They're very experienced, so it's been a good experience overall.
Riverhead did do very well.
Yeah.
It was nice to have them.
Yes.
Well, this is something different, this book. The title itself, the End of the Jews, is a kind of an interesting kind of title. And you say in some notes that they provided us that you didn't write the usual multi-generational saga in which the sons are more assimilated than their parents and the grandkids act like wasps. As a matter of fact, I would say in this book there's a struggle, or at least a tension, to try and hold on to that identity, the Jewish identity. Yeah,
I would say that there is. In this book, identity is something that is in flux for pretty much every character, whether a member of the oldest generation, which is one that begins in the 20s and 30s, or of the latest generation, which is folks my age in their 30s and 20s. For these people, identity is something that they're surprised to find how it's used against them in the world, not just religious identity, but all kinds of identity, sexual, political, familial. It's something that they're always trying to figure out and sort of grappling with throughout the 20th century.
And the interesting thing about it is that there are times when that identity gives them trouble, if you will, in the broadest way to say it. But there are other times when it gives them peace, and it gives them a sense of belonging, a kind of shelter almost.
Yeah, I think the paradox of identity and of being labeled for these characters, who are primarily artists, Jewish American artists, in New York, in Connecticut, sometimes journeying abroad. These are folks who are very much on the margins, not just in terms of the Jewish community, but in the sense that all artists occupy, really, in my mind, the margins of society, in the sense that for everyone who is sort of able to fit snugly and comfortably into the bosom of community, whether it's an artistic community, a familial community, a religious community, there are other people who are on the outskirts who feel ambiguous, who feel conflicted, who feel ambivalent, who can't come more fully in. And I think the pain and the perspective that you gain by being on the outskirts is really a significant thing, and in some ways is the impetus that allows folks to be creative. And that's really where these people are. And I think that those margins are particularly well populated, if you will, for Jews, because the nature of a Jewish identity is so complicated. There are people who feel religiously Jewish.
Right.
There are people who feel ethnically, historically Jewish. You have Jews saying stuff like, well, I'm Jewish, but I'm Buddhist,
And there's a character in this book who screams at her mother, "What do you mean I'm Jewish? We don't do anything Jewish here. Don't call me Jewish." Right.
This is a girl, Nina, who grows up in the Czech Republic, actually rather in Czechoslovakia before it became the Czech Republic.
Before it became that. Yeah,
and she is someone who is not connected in any way to her religion. In fact, it's suppressed and she knows almost nothing about it. And ultimately, her identity is more in flux almost than anyone else's, because she will eventually pass for black in America. She's kind of ambiguous looking. She's got honey skin, and she'll be traveling as a photographer with a jazz band in America, and they will sort of bestow blackness upon her as sort of a compliment. They'll tell her, as a way of making her feel part of the family of the band, that she's too soulful not to have a Creole great-grandfather somewhere back in her family lineage.
That's right. You lying to me when you say you're not got that in your background.
Right. And she will kind of, she'll run with this in a kind of self-serving way, and ultimately though she really knows better, she'll apply to college and check a box marked for black applicants and get a scholarship that way. So really, identity in a lot of ways for these people is something that's up in the air and subject to debate.
Yeah, I just love that moment that you described where she's got the college application in front of her and she fills out 3 different boxes.
Yeah.
Probably got her 3 different scholarships. I don't know. It may be the way to do it.
Might be. Well, it's one way to get into college.
Yeah. The End of the Jews absolutely teems with colorful and interesting characters, as we've been pointing out, most of them artists. And when we come back, let's meet some of them, okay?
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
The End of the Jews is our book today. It's a novel or an epic if you prefer. Adam Mansbach is the author and it's published by Spiegel and Grau. And a very nice person said something very nice about this book. His name is Keith Gesson. And when I can find it, I'll read it. Mansbach has made something new of the multi-generational Jewish epic, and this is far more tough-minded reading than we are used to on this kind of subject. I don't love the Jews any less for it, and neither does Mansbach, but I do know us better for what we are. This is a heartfelt, truthful book. And that's really about, what else can you say when someone wanders, as you had, away from the form, to have somebody say such nice things about it? Congratulations.
Yeah, very nice.
This book is full of characters, and many of them are writers of one sort or another. And so it didn't surprise me that early on you have a little interlude here. This is when the main character is young, the hot guy in the Bronx, and he's just trying to be a writer, and he says, or he reflects, there is so much he wants to write, but Tristan does not know what any of it is. He feels as if ghosts or elves or angels are following him, flitting in and out of shadows, cackling, and every time he stops and whirls around, he's too slow, and they disappear. The only thing that has the power to endow existence with meaning is the very game of trying to transcribe it. And nothing has ever sliced through Tristan like not being able to play. He blinks in the dawn light, rubs the goose pimples from his arm, and catches the sight of a ghastly future, a lifetime of sitting here, incapable of filling these pages, unable to stop trying until he is catatonic, frozen on the outside, and still burning uselessly within. That, I wrote down in my notes, sounds to me like writer's lament.
Yeah, it may be. This comes early in the book when Tristan has really just realized after a very eventful evening that writing is what he wants to do. And it's a revelation to him which involves a kind of glorious casting off of expectation, because Tristan is the son of immigrants. He's sort of a 15-year-old kid who's already in college. He's already, been marked as very brilliant and as his family's hope, really, of financial success. So he's expected to be a doctor or a lawyer, but Tristan is a real kind of when in Rome, do as the Egyptians kind of guy. So he's realized that being a writer allows one to grapple with life on sort of a larger level, or at least he thinks so. And he's a young man who has a real appreciation for complexity and for paradox. And throughout his life as a writer, he'll get into a lot of trouble because he will insist on that complexity.
Whatever happens, he ain't going to be a nice Jewish boy.
Yeah, not so much. Certainly not nice, and questionable how Jewish he's going to be either.
One of the things that you're tough-minded about in this book, the word that Mr. Gesson uses, one of those things is the relationship between Jews and blacks. Mm-hmm. And somewhere you've talked about, and I don't think this is in the book, the kind of black otherness that is immutable, whereas there is immutability to the Jewish identity. And that, I think you said, creates a tension.
Yeah, well, in some ways, Jewish and black culture have been two poles of my life thus far, because I am Jewish. I was, raised in a very secular household, but I knew it was Jewish. But I was involved in a multitude of ways in black culture and art forms. I was a hip hop kid. I was a rapper. I was a roadie for a jazz band for many years myself, and it seems to me that there's a long and fascinating and complex history between these two groups of people in America. Even if we just were to limit it to sort of artistic engagement, we would have moments like Al Jolson singing in blackface in the 1920s, the Duke Ellington Orchestra being pulled off of a train in Nazi Germany and being told that they played nigger Jew music, Ralph Ellison and Saul Bellow striking up this amazing correspondence in the 1950s, the sort of civil rights alliance of blacks and Jews in the 1960s, the rather spectacular dissolving of that alliance in the 1980s. And I think a lot of the story there is really about the ways in which Jews have assimilated further into the American mainstream, and in some ways relied on kind of blackness as an other that was less changing, less able to change, as a way to sort of kick off and move into that mainstream.
One of the nice things that you get into in terms of that relationship in the book is what happens to Nina. She's wonderfully and immediately accepted by these, traveling black musicians.
She is, yeah. I want to be very tough-minded and critical about the whole process. One of the things I'm really looking at here is the line between appreciation and appropriation.
Well, hold on that. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the strong, virile, unstoppable Tristan. That's the way he's described somewhere in the book. Just wait and hear about that.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. It is Conversations on the Coast. The End of the Jews is our book today, a novel, an epic by Adam Mansbach, published by Spiegel and Grau. And one Bakari Kitwana, author of, and this is a title you must love, The Hip-Hop Generation. He says, you're a writer bold enough for these times. You deliver a stunning examination of the evolution of American history, identity, blacks and Jews, together with an incredible ability to fuse them all. An amazing portrait of love, betrayal, despair, and the surviving power of the human spirit. And it's a book driven by wonderful characters, Nina, by the jazz composer, musician Albert, and, of course, Tristan, the strong, virile, unstoppable one. And he really is. And in your mind, I think he bears some resemblances to your own grandfather.
He does in some ways.
With whom you spent a very fascinating summer or so on Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, I actually spent about 6 of them with my grandfather as I was trying to write this book. And I leaped into this book without much of an idea where I was going. I had probably less of an outline, less of a plot in mind than with any previous book of mine. So it took me a long time. And I knew it was sort of about grandfathers and grandsons. I knew it was a sort of conversation between generations. Mm-hmm. And really every day I would sit down with my grandfather. We would eat dinner. We would watch a Red Sox game. The Red Sox would break our hearts yet again. And I would really ask him as much as I could think to about his life. I would try to get him talking. He's not a writer. He actually was a lawyer and a judge. But like Tristan, he's a guy who put his work first and his family in some ways second. And, I was hanging out with him after my grandmother had died, and he was sort of trying to figure out how to reconstitute his life and looking back on it and having a lot of regrets. And I was really able to get to know him in a way that I never had before, and it was wonderful.
What a wonderful experience. And believe me, it does come through in the book beautifully and very, very powerfully. There's a character in this book of yours who starts out as a minor player, and then she becomes extremely central. Her name is Mariko. Tell us about Mariko.
Mariko is the manager and wife of a musician with whom Tristan Brodsky, the novelist who's sort of the family patriarch, is friends over the course of about 40 years. Mariko comes into focus after this man dies, and her life's work really was keeping her husband Albert alive and playing music. She felt so strongly about his music that she in some ways relegated herself to that duty. So the question then becomes, after he is gone, how does she reconstitute and reinvent herself? And this is a character in many ways who came out of my experience as a roadie for the great drummer Elvin Jones, who died in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife and manager similarly was devoted to his music and to keeping that legacy going. Elvin was John Coltrane's drummer throughout the 60s, really probably the greatest drummer ever. And a lot of my musings came as a result of thinking about what Elvin's wife, Keiko, would do when he was gone.
Mm-hmm. So she is there. She's alone now. And incredibly, something starts between her and one of the other women characters.
Yeah, there is a brief affair between these two women, which will go on to sort of have an impact for the next 40 years, although they don't see each other. It's sort of a moment that stays with them both and will ultimately have some huge ramifications for the marriage of Tristan and his wife, Amalia.
Is she a favorite character of yours, or Mariko?
I try not to play favorites with my characters because my conviction is that if you want them to work, you've got to love them equally. You can't love one any more than the other, or that character will get all the good lines, and they sort of all have to come out of you. So I'm affectionate toward all of them, although I do have a great affection for the sort of real-life inspiration for this character. And she's certainly someone that I've spent a long time pondering and spent a lot of time hanging out with backstage, drinking tea, and someone that I'm certainly very fond of.
I have the sense that writing this book must have been kind of exhausting for you. And I wonder what in the world you're thinking of doing next. Maybe two short stories or something?
It was in some ways exhausting. I'm about 150 pages into my next one. I also have a 5-week-old daughter, so I'm exhausted on a lot of levels.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right, well, listen, we're going to let you go back to that 5-week-old daughter.
Thank you.
We really are very, very appreciative for you taking the time to join us.
My pleasure.
The book, The End of the Jews, the author Adam Mansbach. This is Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.